All right, the one with the hand raised, you can go ahead, unmute your mic, or you can type your question in the chat, and that will be addressed. All right, when can you carry your mark for Prac 3? During TH8, so the first session of our practical session, the first period of our practical session, as usual, you can DM your marking assistant and query your mark. All right, so we're going to start doing, start applying some of the things that we've been talking about for the last week and a half. Today, we're going to use the adapter pattern. I've copied some text here directly from what you were taught last year. So this should be familiar to you. The adapter or wrapper pattern allows you to convert the interface of a class into another interface that a client expects. So the client is going to be our main class. It wants to work with a queue. We already have the singly linked list, so we're going to adapt the singly linked list to make it act like a queue, right? For it to have the behavior or have the interface of a queue. All right, there's some comment there. Unless it's a question or a comment to do with the prac, please don't type it here. All right, there really is no reason to waste time with that. All right, so the adaptee will be the singly linked list. We're going to adapt that into a queue, and that's going to be the prac for today. All right, of course, we're going to be applying that to some real life problem, and so we'll discuss that as we go along. So this is what we're trying to create, a queue. You recall the queue ADT follows the first in, first out rule. So we enqueue from the back and we dequeue from the front. Right? We have three simple methods: enqueue, dequeue, and front, which returns a reference to the front without dequeuing it. And we also have some helper methods like size and is empty, and those are what you'll have to implement. I say implement in quotes because you'll actually be calling methods from a private instance of a singly linked list to create the behavior of a queue. All right, so it's less work than starting from scratch, implementing a node, then implementing that behavior of a queue, perhaps using linked nodes. Instead, we're going to use an implementation that we already have to create the behavior of a queue. All right, we'll recall what the singly linked list looks like. Okay, we already implemented that in, I think, our second prac. So you have the singly linked list. Each node stores an object that has some element in it, and then a reference to the next node within this list. We have the head and tail, and the tail will point to some null, which indicates that we're at the end of our list. So the work for today is to implement a queue class using the adapter pattern, so using the implementation that we have of singly linked list, and then to complete our main class. For our main class, we're going to give you, or you're going to type in a series of transactions, and then you're going to have to calculate capital gain or loss based on those transactions. Okay, what do I mean by transactions? Well, we can talk about buying or selling shares. So each transaction will say that we're either buying or selling, then the quantity of shares that we're buying or selling, and then for what price are we buying or selling these shares. So at the end of the day, we'll have a certain number of buy transactions and then a certain number of sell transactions. And your job is to then calculate, well, what was the capital gain or loss, right? We could have bought them at a certain price and then sold them at a lesser price, in which case we have a loss. So we'd have a negative value for our answer. However, if we sold them for more than what we bought them for, then we'll have made some gain. All right, so that's the work for today. All right, so if we're just looking at the top there for our transactions, you're going to type in a series of transactions. And these are going to be stored in a instruction queue. So that's just strings, a bunch of strings that have buy or sell, space, some number, space, another number. First number represents quantity, second number represents price. And then you're going to call a method that you're going to have to implement that will take that queue of transactions or instructions and split those into two queues, a buy queue and a sell queue. And if we just look at those two queues in orange, the 3 buys from our queue have been put into our buy queue in order, and then the 1 sell has been put into the sell queue. Then we want to find out, did we make some money or did we lose some money? And we're going to follow the rule of selling shares in the order that we have bought them. So we're going to sell the ones that we've held onto for the longest to satisfy our sell transactions. So for this sell, we want to sell 150 shares at 30, whatever monetary unit may be, let's say Rand. So we want to sell 150 shares at 30 Rand. Where do we get those 150 shares? Do we go to the 200 shares that we bought at 36 Rand? No, we want to sell the ones we've held on to the longest. So we go to the 100 shares we bought at 20 Rand. We want those, all of them, because we need all of them. We're trying to sell 150. We want all 100 of those to go towards our sale. We still haven't satisfied our sale. We still need 50 more. So we go to the next transaction, next buy transaction. We see that there are 20 shares there. We take those 20, and we also want to use those as part of the shares that we're selling. Have we satisfied 150 shares that we want to sell? Still no. So we still have 30 more. We go to our next buy transaction where we bought 200 at 36 Rand a share. We take 30 of those, and we're going to put those towards our sale. That gives us the entire 150, and that's what we're going to calculate, what we're going to use to calculate our capital gain or loss. Note that from that 150 that we're selling, we bought them at 3 different prices. 100 of those were bought at 20 Rand, 20 of those were bought at 24 Rand, and the remaining 30 were bought at 36 Rand. So we're actually making a loss for those last 30. Right. Question, can you cover how, let me just go back, the pop-up went away. Can you over how this works again, please? Well, we're currently covering how it works, so I will go over it again if you wish at the end of it, but let's first complete our discussion of how it works. Right. So before you even start thinking of how you're going to implement it, we're just trying to get an idea of what we're trying to do, what the logic should be. Right? Not the individual methods. We will get to that as usual. So because we've bought 3 collections, 3 sets of shares at different prices to create this 150 that we're selling, we're going to have to calculate our profit or loss in 3 different calculations. The first 100 were bought for 20 and sold for 30. So the profit is the selling price minus the buying price multiplied by the number of shares. That's that first calculation. 100 of those 150 were bought for 20 Rand. So we're making a profit of 10 Rand per share, 30 minus 20. We multiply that by 100 to get 1,000 Rand profit. That's for 100 of that 150 that we're selling. The next 20, we bought at 24 Rand. All right, that's an errata, I'll correct that. We bought at 24 Rand. And so the calculation is correct. It's 30 minus 24. That gives us 6. We multiply that by 20, and we get 120 profit for those 20 shares. Then the remaining 30 are from the set that we bought for 36. So we're selling for 30. We bought for 36. We're actually making a loss of 6. We multiply that by the number of shares. That gives us 30. That's actually a loss. And so when we add that all up together, we end up with 1,000 plus 120 minus 180, and that gives us a profit of a positive number, 940 Rand. Note, the remaining 170 shares should still remain in our buy queue because we haven't sold those yet. We cannot calculate the profit on those at all because we haven't sold them yet. If we were to try and calculate the profit right now, we'd have to use the current selling price, and that's not necessarily the price we're going to sell them at. So those should remain in our queue or be returned into our queue, and then we deal with whatever cells come after that. All right, so do we understand the general idea? Regardless of how we were going to implement it, we're going to have a series of transactions. They're buy and sell transactions. They don't have to be in order, right? Or rather, the order does imply the sequence in which they happen. I just mean it doesn't have to be all buys, then all sells. It can be buys and sells together. We're going to separate those to have an order of in what sequence we bought them and how we want to do those sells. Then for each sale, we're going to have to satisfy that sale by going to our buy queue and then taking shares from there at each point, calculating what's our profit for the sets of shares. And if we need to go to more, we go to the next one in our queue and then calculate that. So for example, if our first sell was simply 80 shares, we'd take 80 of that initial 100, calculate our profit of 10 times 80, and that 800 would be our profit. Right? The remaining 20 shares at 20 Rand should still then remain in our buy queue. We don't go further than that. Then perhaps we have another sell instruction, then we satisfy that. Question, to change the 200 shares to 170, do we DQ, change it, then add it back to the queue? Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? Right? That's one of the few things that you actually have to think for yourself, so I won't answer that one. Right. Someone asked for us to go over it again. There are two parts. You may be asking about the adapter part. That is exactly as you did last week. In fact, I had a discussion with Mr. Marginlal to make sure that it was really close to what you did last time. I do understand that you guys would use an interface between the client and the adapter. So this is actually somewhat similar than what you looked at. So this is simply going to be, given the adapter, which is a singly linked list, create a private instance of that within your adapter and call methods from there to create the behavior of a queue. All right, but we'll look at the code for that. Your client, which is going to be our main method or our main class, will then call, or rather in this case, it'll create instances of that adapter and do things with that. So it'll create instances of what it sees as a queue and work with that. All right, yes, I'm going to upload the PDF. I didn't want to upload it just yet because I saw that a lot of you last time just simply went away, and then I had the same questions asked over and over and over again. So let's first agree on what it is that we're trying to do, then we can get on to the rest of it. All right, then as for what are we trying to do in terms of the main class, well, we're going to have a sequence of transactions. So you're actually going to type this in, or the main method stores this as a queue of strings for you. But you're going to type in instructions such as buy X amount of shares at Y price, buy some others at another price, and then sell a certain amount at another price. You have to then calculate the capital gain or loss. So have I made some money or have I lost some money by selling shares at this price? And as happens, if you buy at a certain price and the price continues to decrease and you want to get out, you're going to sell at a price lower than that which you bought, and so you're going to make a loss. If, however, you bought at the bottom of the market and so prices were low, then later on you want to sell. Ideally, then the price is higher, you sell and you make a profit. So we want to calculate that. But if you are a shrewd investor, you don't simply buy a whole bunch of shares at once, right? They have a whole bunch of different strategies for doing this. And though the names are fancy, they really equate to buying a fixed amount or a fixed value of shares over a period of time. So you're averaging out the price at which you're buying these shares, which ensures that, let's say we want to spend the same amount of money each time. We're going to buy more shares when it's cheaper and less shares when it's more expensive. And of course, if the price goes down, we get to buy more shares for the same price. If it goes up, the shares we bought previously increase in value. All right, that's all got to do with buying and selling shares. We just want to know for these transactions, what is the profit or loss that we've made? So our strategy is going to be this. We're going to take this sequence of purchase and sale transactions, our buys and our sells. We're going to put them into two separate queues. Then at the end of the day, basically, at the end of it all, we're going to calculate what profit did we make by satisfying our sell transactions from shares within our buy queue. We want to sell the ones we've held the longest. So we go to the front of our queue and we take shares from there. If that is sufficient, then we will simply either use up all of those if we need to, or leave some for when we need a certain amount from there. If that first purchase transaction is not enough, then we will use it all up and go on to the next one until we are satisfied. All right, there's already some questions. Where will the gain or loss be stored? All right, it'll just be stored in the temporary variable, and that when you call the method, it's stored there to be displayed. All right, but we don't need to keep that over time. you can have more transactions and then you have to calculate another capital gain or loss. So it's simply like an instantaneous value right now. So today, let's say we've had all these transactions. Today, what's our gain or loss? Then tomorrow we have more transactions, but the ones we did yesterday won't go away, right? The purchases will still have those of the ones that we haven't sold yet. And so you can ask again, well, now what's the capital gain or loss? Or capital gain or loss. All right, what happens when you sell more than what you have? All right, in that case, then you should return that we cannot satisfy the sales, so we don't have enough buy transactions to satisfy the sell transactions. All right, I'll show you in the main method how it interprets that, and so you should return a null from that method if you cannot process all the transactions. All right, someone asked to explain again, so for the last time, please, you're going to type in the sequence of transactions. Then you have to calculate capital gain or loss. How do you do that? You're going to take that linked list of strings representing, or rather, sorry, it's going to be a queue of strings representing these transactions. There is a transaction data type that's been created for you. You're going to use that to split these transaction strings into actual transactions. So you're going to say what type of transaction it is and what the value and the quantity is. Then you're going to put those into separate queues. Okay, if it was a buy transaction, you put that quantity and price into your buy queue. If it was a sell transaction, you put that transaction which stores the quantity and value into your sell queue. You then end up with a bunch of transactions. So like tuples of quantity, price, quantity, price, quantity, price in two queues, a buy queue and a sell queue. Then you're going to calculate your capital gain or loss by doing these calculations. For your sell, like for each cell, go to the first buy and check, does the number of shares in that purchase transaction satisfy the sale? If it does, then calculate using that single sale price and that single buy price. If it does not, then say, okay, of those, I'll take all of those and that will form part of my sale transaction. So I'll be part of my calculation. I will still have some more that I need to sell. I go to my next buy transaction. All right, and there's a question. So if that happens, we have to fix the queue. Like if you don't have enough shares to sell, you have to put them back. No, at that point, we'll just say we can't deal with it. All right, we're not able to calculate what the profit or loss is at this moment. All right, I'll show you what that should look like. If there are shares left from those taken from the front of the queue, are they returned to the front of the queue? Yes, they should return to the front of the queue because they're still the ones that were bought the longest time ago. All right, how you do that, that's up to you. All right. I trust after that third time we understand what's being asked. What happens if you first buy a transaction as shares that are more than the first sell? All right, then you can satisfy the entire sell. That's good. Take that number of shares from that buy, calculate what the profit is, and you're good to go. All right. Of course, you do that until you run out of sell transactions or until you find that you can't actually satisfy a sell transaction. Then, how are we going to do this? So in that discussion with Mr. Marvin Long, I was also told that you guys have dealt with jar files and not just creating them, but actually using them. And so that's what we're going to do for this prac. And all things going well, that's what we're going to do for all the pracs. Rather than giving you source files, we're going to give you a jar file that contains class files, and then you will simply implement specific. All right, the question before we go on, so we create this file. Yes, you're going to type them in. You're not going to read from the file. All right, so you're going to give in a jar file. This jar file contains certain class files. You then, understanding what those classes do, are able to implement what you have to implement. So we're going to give you a class file. So that's the compiled slist file. You can then create instances of that and use it to implement your queue. All right. I'll show you diagrams now to show you what methods it has, but you're going to have to use the jar file. I understand that you have been taught this, but just as a refresher, we're going to give you the jar file. To use this on Eclipse, you have to extract the zip file that we're going to give you. It is exactly as shown here. It's student number underscore p4.zip. So I'm trying to make it as close to what you have to do to hand it at the end as possible. You're going to extract that. That gives you a directory, a folder, right? You change the letter student number to your student number. You move that folder to your Eclipse workspace. I'm told that's exactly what you did last year. Then you create a new project with the same name. That'll make Eclipse access those files for your new project. And if your jar file is in the top level directory, as it's given to you in the zip file, then Eclipse will actually add that to your class path automatically. If you get an error, then you're supposed to right-click on that new project that you created, click on Java build path, add external jars, then navigate to the jar file, select it, apply and close. All right, that should all be familiar to you. I do know that some of you aren't using Eclipse. So for those of you that are using perhaps Notepad++ or whatever else, and you're compiling and running your programs in terminal command prompt, in Windows, using command prompt, this is how you'd compile and run it. If the jar file come with the corresponding Java doc, it has the Java, that's actually interesting. I believe it will retain the correct comments somewhere in there. And so if you run javadoc, which you're supposed to do, that should create them for you. All right, it's sufficient though to have the correct ones in the source code that you're going to hand in. All right, your assistant's online but not responding. It's not yet TH8. DM me if it's still an issue when we're in the correct session. All right, for Windows, you're going to have to compile it by saying javac, that's your Java compiler, then including the class path, that jar file. You can include several jar files separated by a semicolon, and then you have to say where your bin folder is. So put everything in a single directory and simply put a period there to indicate that this is where my other source files are, and this is the file that contains my main class. All right, that should compile no issue. Then to run it, again, Java CP, the jar file, semicolon, again, this is where now my compiled files will be, my class files, and you call main. If you're on Linux, it's much the same, except instead of semicolons, you're going to use a colon. All right. Most of you will be using Eclipse, so I'll show you how to do that presently or just after we cover these next two slides. All right, I will add a PDF of these slides within the additional files simply because you don't actually have access to these. I think in the future, we will give you simply the interfaces so that you understand what their behavior is, and then you can go ahead and use the classes that have already been compiled for you. So in this case, you have a jar file that contains that S list. It also has its own node class within the source file. However, you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about the S list itself and its behavior. You're going to create an instance of that in your linked queue file to be able to then use the data pattern to create the behavior of a queue. So you have to satisfy that queue interface. But all you're going to have is this linked queue class. All right, but understanding what methods are there, and on the left there what methods you have to implement. However, we've already given you the signatures within the class, so it's even easier for you. Then within your main method, within the process transactions method, you're actually going to have to process the transactions. So the sequence of transactions that you typed in, those are stored in a queue of type string. You're going to then, for each of those, put them into either the by transaction queue or the sell transaction queue. For that, you actually have to store transactions, which are of this type on the bottom left. They store a quantity, which represents the number that you have purchased or sold, and then a unit price, which is simply the price. All right, again, you can create instances of this. You don't actually have access to the source file, but you don't need that. You can simply create instances of it to be able to create transactions and store them within those two queues. Okay, just for interest's sake, when you're done, this is what should exist, right? Although everything on the top and the bottom right is within the jar file, what you're creating and implementing rather on the left and the right is in the jar file. So what you're implementing is that linked queue at the top and also the main class at the bottom there in the middle. So you have two, there are instance variables, class variables, because they're static, a sell queue and a buy queue, and you're going to populate those with transactions of either sells or buys. Right, and so this should make it a little easier that people have different setups can still use the same classes without having to make any changes. I will show you that it does work, but I'm going to put all the code onto Eve now. I'd like you to actually download that zip file, and then together you're gonna put on Eclipse on a single folder and compile everything on either Windows or Linux. Convince yourself that it works, then you can go ahead and implement the two methods. At present, all the methods simply return the default values. So those that you return ints return 0, booleans false, and reference types nulls. So it will run, but you won't be able to calculate a profit or loss. However, once you've implemented those two methods in the main method and all the methods or most of the methods that are within that linked queue class, then it will work correctly. All right, there is a question, I will address that, but first I want to put everything on Eve so that you can download it yourselves and get started. Okay, so it's on Eve now. You can go ahead and take a look. I'll just show you what the assignment document looks like. So there is some description of what you're expected to do. Again, we're going to use that adapter pattern to get this done. We're trying to calculate profit or loss. There's an explanation of the exact same calculation that I showed you there. For those who still don't understand, go and read this first thoroughly. Then if you still don't understand, you may ask a question in the channel. Okay, use this as sample input and output to make sure that it works correctly. Again, you should submit a single zip file, student number underscore p4.zip. So take the entire project, which should have the correct name, a directory with your student number underscore p4, simply zip that and submit that onto Eve. All right, so there are a number of methods within the link queue itself that you're going to implement. Those should really be straightforward because you're simply calling methods that already exist in the singly linked list. Then those two methods that require some of your own logic to be able to process transactions, as in put them into two queues, then calculate the capital gain or loss, having those two queues, and of course, correct compilation and execution. All right, if it compiles, you get 5. If it executes correctly, you get the other 5, and you get all 10 marks. Of course, if it compiles and you have nonsense in there, then you won't get those 5 marks. As in, you could always just submit what we give you, and that would still compile. Right, there are some other questions and some unnecessary comments. Okay, I see there are no new questions. So I'll simply go onto my other machine and I will show you what you have to do to import this onto Eclipse. But that should be straightforward. As I'm told, you have done it before, but let's not assume anything and we'll all do it together. All right, there's a question. How do you know when to calculate the profit or loss? You can do it at any time. So simply do the example that you're given here, put in these 4 transactions, then select calculate capital gain or loss, and see what answer you get. If your logic is correct, you should get 940. If you don't get 940, then you know your logic is not correct. Okay, so there was a question as I was switching over. Do you need to input the values? Yes, you're going to input those 4 strings and then calculate the profit or loss. So I'm opening up Eclipse. Download the zip file from Eve, extract it, that gives you a folder. Go and put that folder into your Eclipse working directory. I'll do the exact same thing right now. So extract all. That gives me a folder with the same name as the zip file. If I look inside of it, there shouldn't be another folder subdirectory with the same name. Straight away, I see a source directory that has my 2 source files, and at the top, at the root directory there, a jar file as well. All right, so I'm going to cut this folder, take the entire folder, go to where my Eclipse workspace is. It should be
just to
drive, users, your username, Eclipse
so we can see your screen.
You paste it right there. All right, now I'm going to share Eclipse so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Yes, you can't see what I'm doing. I'm describing what I'm doing. You're supposed to be doing it yourself. All right, so that when you create your project in Eclipse, it will already be there. Does that make sense? But please make sure you actually rename the directory to whatever your student number is. I'm just renaming it to some generic one, and I'll show you that. Please re-explain, please repeat. Okay, do we know how to download something from Eve? You've been doing that for many weeks. Go and download it. Extract it, right-click, extract all. That gives you a folder. Take that folder, place it in your Eclipse workspace. All right, since it seems that's also too much, I will show you step by step. So let's an application. All right, so you should see a number of things there. What should draw your attention is this. I right-click, extract all. That gives me a folder with the same name. I'm going to change that student number to whatever your student number is. I'm going to right-click on that. I'm going to cut it. I want to place it somewhere. It has to be in my Eclipse workspace, which by default is in your user directory there. So C drive, users, your username, then Eclipse workspace. Okay, I had just done this, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to paste it here, and there it is. I'm actually going to copy this name to make sure that I create a project with the exact same name. Okay, that's fine. Put it in a directory then. Create your own directory, your student number underscore P4, then dump it in there. Great. So is everybody there? We've created the directory, and we now should be moving it to our Eclipse workspace. All right. As I said, this is not arbitrary. This is what I'm told you did last year, so this should be a lot more familiar and easier. I get the following error when compiling. Well, we haven't even gotten to compilation yet, right? But let's see. Class file has wrong version. 57 should be 55. Please make sure that you're using Java 11. That's what we've agreed upon. If you're not, then do so. Make sure when you create your project, you're doing it, you're conforming to the Java runtime environment 11. But I will do that as I create this new project. So let me switch to Eclipse so that we can all see that. Okay, so in a moment, you should all see Eclipse. Great, here we go. Let me close this. I can click on Create Java Project or File, New Java Project. Okay, I trust you've seen the dialogues. Yes, you are. Project name, I'm going to paste that exact same project name. Why? Because I know I've already created a folder with the correct files in my Eclipse working directory. Is it necessary to use Java 11 for this prac? Yes, this and every other prac, as I've said before. If you haven't been doing that, please do, because you may get errors, especially if we're already giving you compiled code. Right? So if you're using Eclipse, then it's fine. You can simply change this option to use Java 11. If you're not using Eclipse, then you're going to have to make sure you use Java 11. All right, people are saying, I can't see anything on screen. Is that true for everyone? Because I'm checking back in, the screen is blank. Okay, so perhaps it does not show you the pop-up. Let me just click finish. All right, all I did was click on create file, new project or new Java project. Then for the name, I use the exact name of the folder, which is that dummy student number underscore P4. Let me just go back to see what the chat has said. Okay. Can you now see Eclipse? Yes, okay, good. So some say no, some say yes. Okay, well, that's more concerning if it seems every other one doesn't see something and others do. All right, as soon as, yes, refresh please. As soon as this is done, I will ask everybody to leave the session so that the recording can be available on Blackboard, so you can see there if you still can't see now. All right, as mentioned on Eve and on Discord, because load shedding is planned for today, we've extended the upload time from your usual hour extra to now 3 hours. So you can have load shedding for 2.5 hours and you will still have more time than usual. You still have 3.5 hours to complete and submit your solution. So please, that means after that, what time is load shedding? It depends where you live. Can't answer that question. So please make sure that by 8 o'clock you have uploaded this. What? Okay, I see someone has an exception. IQ has been compiled by a more recent version of Java runtime. Can you build path for jar file? You can set the build path as I showed in the slides there if you're not using. Okay, let me actually show in case people have an issue with that. All right. No, yours should not be 27 many zeros and 1. It should be your student number underscore P4. And then there should not be another directory with the same name within that. It should be straight away the jar file and the source file. Right, there's a hand raised. Go ahead and ask, please. Right, while you're doing that, I just want to go into this and show that it does indeed work. You should have the main and your link queue there. Granted, these simply return some default values, and main does the same thing for the two methods that you're actually supposed to implement. The one processes transactions and puts them into these two queues. The other calculates the capital gain or loss. Note that as it returns null, this is going to be seen as that they're unmatched cell transactions. So make sure that if you get to unmatched cell transactions, then there are not enough buy transactions to satisfy those cell transactions, just return a null. Otherwise, you calculate the capital gain or loss, and that is returned, and that's what's printed out here. Okay, let me go back to the questions. Okay, people seem to be having the same issue. And are you both using Java 11? Yes, yes. All right, then give me a moment, please. All right, so some are getting the issue, some are not. And it seems people are using a range of different Java versions. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to create one now for Java 14 and then one for Java 11, and I'll add an underscore 11 and underscore 14. That should work for everyone. All right. But then please, next week, let's all be on the same page and be using 11. Okay, so I'm going to end the session there. I'm going to update that so that we have two different jar files. I will have them in two different zip files. They will have the same name, except the one will say underscore 11 and the other one underscore 14. All right. So then, okay, those who are using 15 don't seem to have the issue. So perhaps try to configure it for that. But we have agreed to 11, so I will do it for both quickly now. And the only difference will be that the jar file was compiled and created using 14 for the one, and then compiled and created using 11 for the other. All right, but we still have time before the session begins, so I'll have that up there in the next few minutes. Then I'll be available on Discord after that. Could you upload on for JDK 8? No, because we don't use JDK 8, right? We've made it quite clear we're using 11 this year, and I don't even think I have 8 on my machine, so that would take even more time. Right. Unfortunately, in that same amount of time, you could simply download 11 in the time that I'll download 8 and then recompile for 8 as well. All right. If you don't have any issues, then you can go straight ahead. All right. If you don't have an issue, then you can go ahead and get started. If you do have an issue, I will cater for that now. But if you don't, then don't. All right. When Eclipse asks for the module info file, just say don't create. So you either click next and then unclick the checkbox to not create it, or you click finish and then it asks you about creating it. Just say don't create. Right, great. All right, so that will be the end. And I will let you know on Discord when the 2 versions are up.